The mahogany conference table stretched between us like a battlefield. Madison sat across from me, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the polished wood, a smile playing at the corners of her red lips. She'd worn her best black dress, the one that cost more than my monthly rent, and diamond earrings that caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Richardson and Associates. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I sat in my simple navy blazer, the one I'd bought at Target 3 years ago for job interviews. My hands were folded in my lap, steady, waiting. People always said we looked nothing alike. Madison had inherited our father's commanding presence, his sharp jawline, his ability to fill a room just by walking into it. I got our mother's quiet intensity, her tendency to observe first, speak second. Attorney Richardson cleared his throat and opened the leather-bound folder. We're here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Harold Benjamin Torres, beloved father and successful businessman. My chest tightened at the word beloved. Dad had been many things, but beloved wasn't the first word that came to mind. Demanding, yes. Ambitious, absolutely. Present? That was complicated. To my daughter Madison Elena Torres, Richardson began, his voice carrying the weight of legal formality. I leave the family business, Torres Construction Company, including all assets, properties, equipment, and ongoing contracts. The estimated value of these holdings is approximately $12 million. Madison's smile broke wide open. She actually clapped her hands together like a child on Christmas morning. "Oh my God," she whispered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I knew it. I knew Dad would do the right thing." Richardson continued without missing a beat. Additionally, the family home in Westfield, the vacation property in Lake Tahoe, and the investment portfolio managed by Goldman Sachs, valued at approximately $4 million. $16 million. Madison was getting $16 million, plus the business that would continue generating income for decades. She was 28 years old and had just become one of the wealthiest women in Denver. The lawyer's eyes found mine across the table. "To my daughter Emma Catherine Torres," he read, and my stomach dropped. "I leave my personal library, my collection of vintage tools, and the sum of $50,000 to help with any immediate expenses." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's smile faltered for exactly 2 seconds before returning full force. "Oh, Emma," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand with mock sympathy. "At least you got something, right? Dad always said you needed to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. $50,000 against Madison's $16 million. It wasn't just the money, though the disparity was breathtaking. It was what it represented. Even in death, Dad had made his choice crystal clear. Madison was the heir, the chosen one, the daughter worthy of carrying on his legacy. I was an afterthought, worthy of some old books and pocket change. But I didn't cry. I didn't gasp or protest or storm out. I just sat there, my face a careful mask of composure, because somewhere deep in my bones I'd been expecting this. My entire life had been preparation for this moment. Madison stood up, smoothing her dress. "Well, I think we're done here," she announced, gathering her purse. "Emma, if you need help moving Dad's books out of the house, just let me know. I'll probably be redecorating anyway." Attorney Richardson raised his hand. "Actually, please sit down, Madison. We're not quite finished." Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. Madison's confident stride faltered, and she slowly lowered herself back into her chair. "There's one more document," Richardson said, reaching into a different section of his briefcase. "A sealed envelope that your father specifically requested be opened only after the primary will was read." The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper with Emma Catherine Torres written across the front in Dad's unmistakable handwriting. My name, not Madison's. Mine. Madison's face went pale. "What is that?" Richardson carefully broke the wax seal. "I'm about to find out." The envelope crackled as Attorney Richardson unfolded it, the sound unnaturally loud in the suddenly tense conference room. Madison's manicured fingers had stopped drumming. Her confident posture had shifted to something more guarded, more alert. "This is a handwritten addendum to the will," Richardson announced, adjusting his reading glasses. Dated 3 weeks before Mr. Torres's death, and properly witnessed by 2 individuals. 3 weeks. Dad had been in the hospital then, after his second stroke. I'd visited him every day, sitting in that uncomfortable plastic chair while Madison came by twice, both times with her phone glued to her ear, handling urgent business matters. The addendum reads as follows, Richardson continued. If you are reading this, Emma, then you have just witnessed what I imagine was a rather one-sided distribution of my estate. I hope you weren't too surprised. My breath caught. Even from beyond the grave, Dad knew exactly how this would play out. By now, Madison is probably calculating how quickly she can sell the Lake Tahoe house and whether the Westfield property would make a good rental investment. She's always been practical about money, which is why she'll make an excellent figurehead for Torres Construction. Figurehead. The word hung in the air like smoke. Madison's face had gone from pale to red. But Emma, you and I both know that running a construction company requires more than just signing checks and attending board meetings. It requires understanding the work, respecting the workers, and knowing the difference between building something that lasts and building something that merely looks impressive. Richardson paused, glancing between Madison and me. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Which brings me to the real purpose of this letter. Emma, what your sister doesn't know, what she's never bothered to learn, is that Torres Construction Company is only half of my business empire. Madison shot up from her chair. That's impossible. I've been working at the company for 6 years. I know every division, every project, every… Please let me finish, Richardson interrupted firmly. Madison sat back down, but her hands were shaking now. The other half, he continued reading, operates under a different name. Mountain West Development Corporation. While Torres Construction handles the flashy commercial projects that Madison loves to show off at cocktail parties, Mountain West has been quietly building affordable housing, renovating schools, and constructing community centers across Colorado for the past 15 years. My heart started racing. I'd never heard of Mountain West Development Corporation. Mountain West employs nearly 400 people and generates approximately $18 million in annual revenue. More importantly, it's the work I was actually proud of. The work that mattered. 18 million. I gripped the arms of my chair to steady myself. Madison believes she's inherited a construction company. What she's actually inherited is the corporate side of Torres Construction, the office building, the equipment, the commercial contracts. Profitable, yes. But Mountain West Development, Emma, is yours. The words hit me like a physical blow. Madison's mouth fell open, her confident facade crumbling in real time. You see, Emma, while Madison was networking at charity galas and learning to read financial reports, you were volunteering at Habitat for Humanity. While she was complaining about the quality of workers, you were tutoring construction workers' kids at the community center. You understood something she never did. That building isn't just about profit, it's about people. Richardson reached into the envelope again and pulled out a set of keys and a business card. Mr. Torres has included the address of Mountain West Development's headquarters, as well as contact information for the general manager, a Mr. James Patterson, who has been instructed to provide you with a complete operational briefing. Madison finally found her voice. This is insane. Dad he couldn't just give her a company I've never heard of. That's not possible. I'm afraid it's entirely possible, Richardson replied calmly. Mountain West Development was incorporated as a separate entity in 2008. Your father was the sole owner, and according to this document, Ms. Emma Torres is now the sole inheritor. I stared at the keys in my trembling hand. They were real. This was real. There's one more thing, Emma, Richardson continued reading. In the storage unit behind Mountain West's headquarters, you'll find 15 years' worth of documentation. Every project, every worker we've helped, every family we've housed. But more than that, you'll find letters. Hundreds of them. Thank you notes from families who have homes because of Mountain West. School children whose playgrounds we built. Community leaders whose neighborhoods we helped revitalize. My eyes were burning now, tears threatening to spill over. Madison will inherit money and assets. You're inheriting a legacy. The choice of what to do with it is yours, but I have faith you'll make the right one. You always have. Love, Dad. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison stared at me like I'd just grown a second head. Her carefully constructed world, the one where she was the chosen daughter, the business heir, the favorite, had just imploded. "How?" she whispered. "How did you know about this and I didn't?" But I hadn't known. That was the thing, I'd been just as shocked as she was. Dad had been planning this for years, building a second company, keeping it hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal that everything Madison thought she knew about our family was incomplete. Richardson was gathering his papers. "Ms. Torres, Emma, Mr. Patterson is expecting your call. He's been managing Mountain West's day-to-day operations, but all major decisions have been put on hold pending your inheritance." I looked down at the business card. Mountain West Development Corporation. James Patterson, General Manager. A phone number. An address in a part of Denver I'd driven through but never really explored. Madison stood up slowly, her designer purse clutched against her chest like armor. "This isn't over, Emma. There has to be some kind of mistake, some legal loophole. Companies don't just appear out of nowhere." But as she walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor with less confidence than when she'd entered, I knew she was wrong. Dad had been meticulous about everything in his life. If he'd built a secret company and left it to me, every legal detail would be airtight. The conference room door closed behind Madison with a soft click, leaving me alone with Attorney Richardson and the weight of a revelation that had just turned my entire life upside down. "Miss Torres," Richardson said gently, "I know this is a lot to process. If you have any questions about the legalities—" "Is it real?" I interrupted. "Mountain West Development. Is it actually successful? Actually profitable?" He smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all afternoon. "According to the financial documents your father provided, it's one of the most respected development companies in the region. You're not just inheriting a business, Ms. Torres. You're inheriting a reputation." I stared at the keys again, these small pieces of metal that had just unlocked a future I'd never imagined. Somewhere across town there was an office with my name on it. Employees who'd been waiting to meet me. Projects that needed my approval. For the first time in my life, Dad hadn't just noticed me. He'd been planning for me all along. The address led me to an industrial area of Denver I'd only seen from the highway. All red brick buildings and chain-link fences. The kind of neighborhood where function mattered more than aesthetics. Mountain West Development Corporation occupied a modest two-story building with large windows and a hand-painted sign that had seen better days. I sat in my Honda Civic for 10 minutes, engine off, staring at the building. Employees were walking in and out. Construction workers in hard hats, women in business casual carrying project folders, a man in coveralls wheeling equipment toward a truck marked MW Development. They all looked like they belonged here. I felt like an imposter holding stolen keys. Finally, I forced myself out of the car and walked to the front entrance. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes, looked up as I approached. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "You must be Emma," she said before I could introduce myself. "I'm Linda Martinez. Your father told us you'd be coming by." Her smile was warm, genuine. "We've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." Waiting to meet me? As if they'd known this day was coming. "Is Mr. Patterson available?" I managed to ask. "Of course. He's been clearing his schedule all week." Linda picked up her phone. "James? She's here." Within seconds, a man emerged from a back office, mid-40s, calloused hands, the kind of deep tan that came from years of outdoor work. He wore jeans and a Mountain West polo shirt, and when he smiled, his whole face lit up. "Emma Torres," he said, extending his hand. "I can't tell you how good it is to finally meet you. Your dad talked about you constantly." "He did?" James laughed. "Are you kidding? Half our staff meetings turned into Harry bragging about his daughter, the teacher. How you spent your summers volunteering with Habitat for Humanity. How you organized that fundraiser for the after-school program. He was so proud." My throat tightened. But I never told him about most of that stuff. He kept track, Linda said softly. He'd drive by the community center where you tutored kids. He'd show up at Habitat builds just to watch you work. Never said anything to you directly, but he'd come back here and tell us stories. James nodded. He said you understood what building was really about. Not just putting up walls, but creating spaces where people could thrive. I followed James through the office, past cubicles where people looked up to wave and smile, not the polite professional smiles of strangers, but the warm recognition of people who felt like they already knew me. The walls were covered with photos, ribbon-cutting ceremonies at schools, families standing in front of new homes, children playing on playgrounds. "This is your office," James said, opening a door at the end of the hall. The space was simple but comfortable. A desk by the window, bookshelves lined with construction manuals and community development guides, and on the wall, a framed photo that made my knees weak. It was me, age 12, wearing a hard hat that was too big for my head, standing next to Dad at a construction site. I remembered that day. He'd brought me to work because Madison had a dance recital, and Mom was busy. I'd spent the afternoon asking the workers questions about concrete and rebar, and Dad had let me help measure foundation markers. I'd thought he was just keeping me out of the way. But he'd framed the photo, put it in the office he'd always intended to be mine. "There's more," James said gently. "Your dad wanted you to see the storage room." Behind the building, a large storage unit held 15 years of Mountain West's history. Bankers' boxes lined the walls, each meticulously labeled by year and project. But what caught my attention were the letters, hundreds of them, pinned to corkboards that covered every available wall space. "Dear Mountain West Development," I read aloud from one letter written in a child's handwriting. "Thank you for building our new playground. The monkey bars are my favorite part. Love, Sarah, age 7. Another letter, this one typed, "Mr. Torres, I wanted you to know that the affordable housing unit you built for our family has changed our lives. My daughter has her own room for the first time, and the neighborhood feels safe and welcoming. We will never be able to thank you enough." James stood beside me as I read. Your dad kept every single one. He said they reminded him why we do this work. There were letters from teachers thanking Mountain West for renovating their schools, from elderly residents grateful for accessible housing modifications, from community leaders whose neighborhoods had been revitalized by thoughtful development projects. "How many people work here?" I asked. 412, as of last month. About half are full-time construction workers. The rest are project managers, architects, administrative staff. Your dad made sure everyone earned a living wage and had good benefits. He said a company that builds homes should make sure its own people can afford homes. I sank into a folding chair, overwhelmed. Madison has no idea about any of this. "No," James confirmed. Harry was very clear about that. He said Madison was smart and capable, but she saw construction as a business. You saw it as a calling. But I'm not qualified to run a company. I'm an elementary school teacher. I don't know anything about profit margins, or project management, or Emma. James's voice was firm but kind. Your dad spent 15 years building this company with you in mind. Every decision, every hire, every project was preparation for this moment. You don't need to know everything on day one. That's what we're here for." Linda appeared in the doorway. "Emma, there's someone here to see you." In the front office, a woman waited with 2 children, a boy about 8, and a girl maybe 10. The woman's face was streaked with tears. "Are you Emma Torres?" she asked. "Harry's daughter?" I nodded, confused. "I'm Maria Santos. Your father, Mountain West, built our house 3 years ago. When we heard he passed away, and that you might be taking over..." She gestured to her children. "These are my kids, Alex and Sophia. They wanted to say something to you." The little girl stepped forward, clutching a handmade card. "Miss Emma," she said in a small, serious voice, "your daddy helped us have a home. Mama says you might help other families too. Will you?" The card was covered in crayon drawings. A house with a big red door, stick figures of a family, and in shaky lettering, "Thank you for our home." I knelt down to Sophia's level, my voice barely steady. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to help as many families as I can." As the Santos family left, James put a hand on my shoulder. That's what this is about, Emma. Not profit margins or board meetings. It's about Sophia getting to draw pictures of her family's house. I looked around the office. At Linda's warm smile, at James's hopeful expression, at the walls covered with thank you letters from people whose lives had been changed by work I'd never known was being done in my name. Dad hadn't just left me company. He'd left me a community, a purpose, a way to understand that all those years I'd felt overlooked and undervalued, he'd been watching. He'd been planning. He'd been building something that would let me be exactly who I'd always been. Someone who believed that every person deserved a safe place to call home. The painful part wasn't discovering what I'd inherited. It was realizing how much love and faith Dad had invested in me while I'd spent years feeling like I didn't matter to him at all. 3 days later, Madison called an emergency family meeting. Not at her apartment or mine, but at Dad's house. The house that was now hers, according to the will. She'd scheduled it for Sunday afternoon, to discuss recent developments, as she put it in her text message. I almost didn't go. The past 3 days at Mountain West had been overwhelming but incredible. James had introduced me to project managers, taken me to active construction sites, shown me blueprints for a new community center that was waiting for my approval. I'd even met with 2 families who were on the waiting list for affordable housing units. But Linda had convinced me. Your sister needs to understand what Mountain West really is, she'd said. And more importantly, you need to understand that you're not taking anything away from her. Your father planned this carefully. So I drove to Westfield, to the house where I'd grown up feeling like a guest in my own family. Madison had clearly been busy. Dad's furniture had already been rearranged, his personal photos moved to less prominent locations. She'd even replaced his old leather recliner with a sleek modern chair that looked expensive and uncomfortable. She was waiting in the living room with Mom, who'd flown in from Phoenix the day before. Mom looked older, more fragile than I remembered, her hair completely gray now, and her hands shaking slightly as she held her coffee cup. Emma, Mom said, standing to hug me. Madison told me about this business situation. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I sat down across from them, my backpack containing copies of Mountain West documents at my feet. I'd come prepared. Madison didn't waste time with pleasantries. I've been doing research, she announced, pulling out a thick folder. Mountain West Development Corporation was incorporated in Colorado in 2008. Dad was listed as the sole owner, which means it should have been included in the primary will reading. It was included, I said calmly, in the addendum. Addendums can be challenged, Madison shot back, especially when they contradict the clear intent of the original will. Dad left me the family business. That should include all of his business interests. Mom looked confused. What exactly is Mountain West Development? I opened my backpack and pulled out a portfolio James had prepared for me. It's a construction and development company that specializes in affordable housing, school renovations, and community development projects. It employs over 400 people and generates about $18 million in annual revenue. Mom's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. 18 million? Madison's face had gone red. That's impossible. I would have known if Dad was running another company. Would you? I asked. When was the last time you asked Dad about his work? I mean, really asked, not just complained about quarterly profits, or suggested he modernize the office systems. I worked at Torres Construction for 6 years. You worked in the corporate office. You handled commercial contracts and client relations. Did you ever visit a job site? Did you ever talk to the construction workers? Did you even know their names? Madison's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I pulled out a photograph from my portfolio, Dad in a hard hat, standing with a group of workers at the groundbreaking for a community center. His name was Juan Morales. He worked for Dad for 12 years. Dad went to his daughter's quinceañera last year, and Maria Gonzalez, she's been a project manager for 8 years. Dad helped her get her contractor's license and paid for her certification classes. That's not. Madison started, and Robert Chen, one of the site supervisors. Dad was the best man at his wedding. And Sandra Williams, who runs the administrative department. Dad paid for her son's college tuition when she couldn't afford it. Mom was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. How do you know all this? Because I spent the last 3 days meeting them. They all have stories about Dad, about how he helped them, supported them, treated them like family. They've been waiting 15 years to meet me because Dad talked about me constantly. He was proud of me, Mom. Proud of the work I did volunteering, proud that I understood what he was really trying to build. Madison stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Dad was a businessman, not some community activist. He built commercial properties and made money. That's what he did. That's what Torres Construction did, I corrected. Mountain West Development did something different. It built hope. I pulled out the letters, copies of the thank you notes from families, children, community leaders. I spread them across the coffee table like playing cards. Read them, I said. Read what Dad was actually doing with half of his time while you were complaining about him being old-fashioned. Madison picked up one letter, her hands trembling. It was from a single mother thanking Mountain West for building affordable housing that allowed her to move her children out of a dangerous neighborhood. Mom read another, this one from a elementary school principal whose building had been renovated by Mountain West, complete with a new library and computer lab. The room fell silent except for the sound of turning pages. He never told me, Mom whispered finally. In all our phone calls, all our visits, he never mentioned any of this. Because you never asked, I said, not cruelly, just honestly. None of you did. You asked about his health, about the weather, about whether he was thinking of retiring, but you never asked what made him happy. Madison looked up from the letters, her eyes wet. Why didn't he tell me? If this was so important to him, why didn't he include me? I pulled out one more document, a copy of the email thread between Dad and James Patterson from 2 years ago. James had sent it to me that morning, saying Dad had given him permission to share it if necessary. Read this, I said, handing it to Madison. The email was Dad responding to James's suggestion that they bring Madison into Mountain West's operations. Dad's reply was gentle but firm. Madison is brilliant at what she does, but she sees construction as a profit center. Emma sees it as a way to serve people. Mountain West isn't about making money, it's about making a difference. Madison wouldn't understand that, and trying to force her to would only frustrate us both. Let her excel at what she's passionate about, and let Emma excel at what she's passionate about. Madison read the email twice, then set it down carefully. He thought I was just greedy. No, I said softly. He thought you were practical and good at business. And he left you a very successful company that will make you wealthy for the rest of your life. He just also thought I might be better suited for work that wasn't about money. Mom had been quiet for several minutes, studying the letters and documents. Finally, she looked up at me. Emma, I owe you an apology. Mom? No, let me say this. Her voice was shaking. I spent so many years worried about Madison's future, about making sure she had opportunities, about preparing her to take over the business. And I just assumed you'd find your own way because you were always so self-sufficient. She paused, wiping her eyes. But what I really did was ignore you. I let you feel like you didn't matter, like you weren't part of our plans. And meanwhile, your father was building you a legacy. Madison was crying now, quietly but steadily. I feel so stupid. All those years, working at Torres Construction, thinking I was learning the family business, and Dad was running this whole other company that actually mattered to him. Torres Construction matters too, I said. It employs people, it builds things people need. There's nothing wrong with commercial success. But it's not what made him proud, Madison said. Reading these letters. This is what made him proud. And he knew I wouldn't understand it. The three of us sat in silence for a while, the weight of 15 years of misunderstanding settling around us like dust. Finally, Madison spoke again. What are you going to do with the Mountain West? I looked around Dad's living room, at the family photos Madison had moved, at the expensive new furniture that didn't match his personality, at Mom sitting small and fragile in her chair. I'm going to try to be worthy of it, I said. I'm going to keep building homes for families who need them. I'm going to keep renovating schools and community centers. And I'm going to try to make Dad proud, even though he's not here to see it. Madison nodded slowly. And Torres Construction? That's yours. Dad meant for you to have it, and you've earned it. You're good at what you do, Madison. You'll make it successful. But what if? She hesitated, then took a deep breath. What if sometimes our companies work together? What if Torres Construction handled the commercial work, and Mountain West handled the community projects, and sometimes we collaborated on bigger developments? I stared at her, surprised. You'd want to do that? I'd want to try. Maybe Dad was right that I wouldn't understand Mountain West's mission at first. But maybe I could learn. She gestured at the letters spread across the table. Reading these, I want to understand what made him so proud of this work. Mom reached over and took both our hands. Your father would love that, she said. He always hoped you two would find a way to support each other. And for the first time since the will reading, sitting in Dad's house with his legacy spread out between us, I felt like maybe we were finally becoming the family he'd always hoped we could be. The next Monday morning, I walked into Mountain West Development Corporation as its official owner for the first time. Linda greeted me with coffee and a stack of messages from community leaders, architects, and families on the housing waiting list. But what struck me most was how natural it felt to be there. James wants to show you the Riverside project this morning, Linda said. And you have a meeting at 2 with the school district about the Jefferson Elementary renovation. I spent the morning at a construction site in North Denver, wearing a hard hat that actually fit and boots that Linda had insisted I buy over the weekend. The Riverside project was a 40-unit affordable housing development, and it was beautiful. Not the bland institutional buildings I'd expected, but thoughtfully designed homes with front porches, small gardens, and community gathering spaces. Your dad insisted on the porches, James explained as we walked through the nearly completed development. He said every home should have a place where neighbors could wave to each other. I watched workers installing playground equipment in the central courtyard, while others put finishing touches on the community garden. These weren't just houses being built, this was a neighborhood being created. How long does it typically take families to move in once construction is finished? I asked. About 6 weeks for final inspections and paperwork. We're actually ahead of schedule on this one, James smiled. The crew has been extra motivated since learning you'd be taking over. They want to make a good impression. That afternoon, I sat in a conference room at Jefferson Elementary School, looking at blueprints with the principal, Dr. Sarah Kim, and the district's facilities manager. The school was 70 years old, and while it had been maintained, it needed significant updates to serve its growing population. The biggest issue is the library, Dr. Kim explained. It's too small for our current enrollment, and the technology infrastructure is outdated. We've been trying to get funding for renovations for 3 years. I studied the plans James had prepared. Mountain West's proposal included expanding the library by 30%, creating a dedicated computer lab, updating all the electrical systems, and adding accessibility features throughout the building. What's the timeline? I asked. We could start in June, right after school lets out, and have everything finished before the new school year, James said. The total project cost is estimated at $1.2 million. Dr. Kim winced. The district can contribute about half of that. I looked at the blueprints again, imagining the excited faces of children walking into a brand new library in the fall. What if Mountain West covered the remaining cost? James raised his eyebrows. Emma, that's $600,000. I know what it is. I thought of Dad's letter, of the thank you notes from children whose schools Mountain West had renovated. How many students attend Jefferson Elementary? 420, Dr. Kim said. 420 children who deserved the best learning environment we could provide. Let's do it. Dr. Kim's eyes filled with tears. Are you serious? Completely serious. Education is an investment in the community. Dad understood that. After the meeting, James and I drove back to Mountain West in comfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. You know, your dad used to say that the best construction projects were the ones where you could picture the people who would benefit from them. He was right. He also said you had a gift for seeing people's potential, not just their current circumstances. He said that's what would make you a great leader for the Mountain West. That evening, I called Madison. We'd been texting more frequently since our family meeting, but this was our first real conversation. How's life as a business owner? She asked, and I could hear genuine curiosity in her voice, not sarcasm. Overwhelming, but incredible. I approved funding for a school renovation today. $600,000, just like that. I laughed nervously. This morning I was a teacher making $42,000 a year. This afternoon I was approving six-figure community investments. That's amazing, Emma. Really? Madison paused. I've been thinking about what you said, about Torres Construction and Mountain West collaborating sometimes. Yeah? There's a project I've been considering, a mixed-use development in Aurora. Commercial space on the ground floor, market-rate apartments on the upper floors. Good profit margins, but I kept thinking it was missing something. I waited for her to continue. What if we added affordable housing units? Not enough to hurt profitability, but enough to make a real difference for working families in the area. Torres Construction could handle the commercial aspects. Mountain West could design and build the affordable units. Madison, that's actually brilliant. I've been reading about mixed-income developments. They're better for communities than concentrating all the affordable housing in one area. And they're better for property values, too. We talked for another hour, sharing ideas about how our companies might work together. For the first time in our lives, we weren't competing. We were collaborating. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, site visits, and decision-making. I met with architects who'd worked with Dad for years, approved plans for 3 new affordable housing developments, and started the process of hiring additional project managers to handle Mountain West's growing workload. But the moment that felt most like liberation came on a Thursday afternoon when I was reviewing applications for Mountain West's homebuyer program. One of the applications was from Maria Santos, the woman who'd brought her children to meet me that first day. Her family had been living in a Mountain West rental unit for 3 years and had saved enough for a down payment on one of our affordable ownership homes. Her application was strong, steady employment, good credit, community references from her children's teachers and her neighbors. I approved it immediately. That evening, I called Maria to give her the news. Her reaction, the joy, the disbelief, the gratitude, reminded me why Dad had built Mountain West in the first place. "Miss Emma," she sobbed into the phone, "you're giving my children a forever home, a place where they can grow up and know they belong somewhere." After I hung up, I sat in Dad's old office, my office now, looking at the framed photo of 12-year-old me in an oversized hard hat. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt like I understood him completely. He hadn't left me a business. He'd left me a way to change lives. The liberation wasn't just financial, though the security of knowing I could pay my bills and help others was incredible. It was the freedom to finally be exactly who I'd always been, someone who believed every person deserved dignity, opportunity, and a safe place to call home. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to apologize for caring too much or thinking too deeply about problems other people ignored. I didn't have to make myself smaller to fit into spaces that weren't designed for me. Krasow, I was exactly where I belonged. 2 years later, Mountain West Development Corporation had become one of Colorado's most respected community development firms. We'd completed 8 affordable housing projects, renovated 12 schools, and built 5 community centers across the Denver metro area. But more than the numbers, it was the stories that mattered. There was 8-year-old Marcus Williams, whose mom worked 2 jobs and could finally afford a safe apartment in one of our developments. Marcus had started an after-school science club in the community room, and when I visited last month, he'd excitedly shown me his project on solar panel efficiency. There was Rosa Martinez, a single grandmother raising 3 grandchildren, who'd been selected for our first-time homebuyer program. She'd sent me a photo of her grandchildren doing homework at their own kitchen table for the first time, with a note that simply said, "They have their own rooms now. Thank you for letting them be kids." And there was Jefferson Elementary's new library, where Dr. Kim had reported a 40% increase in student reading scores since the renovation. The children had collectively written me a thank you book, with each student contributing a page about their favorite part of the new space. The transformation hadn't been easy. I'd made mistakes. Approved projects that went over budget, hired contractors who didn't share our values, struggled with city permitting processes that seemed designed to discourage affordable housing development. But James had been right. I didn't need to know everything on day one. I just needed to stay true to the mission. Madison and I had successfully collaborated on 3 mixed-use developments, proving that profitable construction and community development could coexist. Our joint projects had attracted attention from city planners and other developers who wanted to replicate our model. "You know what Dad would say if he could see this," Madison said during one of our monthly sister dinners. We'd started the tradition 6 months after the will reading, and it had become one of my favorite parts of each month. "What would he say?" "That you figured out how to make construction a love language," she smiled. "Remember how he used to say that buildings were just concrete and steel until people made them home?" I did remember. It was one of Dad's favorite phrases, though I hadn't understood what he meant when I was younger. "I think he knew you'd understand that better than I ever could," Madison continued. "I'm good at the business side. Profit margins, efficiency, client relations. But you understand the soul of it." That fall, Mountain West was selected to receive the Colorado Community Development Award, recognizing our innovative approach to affordable housing and community revitalization. The award ceremony was held at the Denver Art Museum, with city officials, other developers, and community leaders in attendance. As I stood at the podium accepting the award, I looked out at the audience and saw faces that had become familiar over the past 2 years. Maria Santos and her children, sitting in the front row, Dr. Kim from Jefferson Elementary, James and Linda, and dozens of Mountain West employees who'd believed in the mission long before I arrived. But what struck me most was seeing Madison in the audience, applauding with genuine pride, and Mom sitting beside her with tears in her eyes. "This award doesn't belong to me," I said into the microphone. "It belongs to every family who trusted us to build their home, every school that let us create better learning spaces for their children, and every community that welcomed our projects. Most of all, it belongs to my father, Harold Torres, who spent 15 years building this company not for profit, but for purpose." After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She was probably in her early 20s, professionally dressed, with a nervous energy that reminded me of myself at that age. "Miss Torres, I'm Jessica Chen, Robert Chen's daughter. He's one of your site supervisors." I remembered Robert, one of the workers Dad had considered family. "I'm graduating from college next month, with a degree in urban planning," Jessica continued. "I've been following Mountain West's work, and I was wondering, would you consider hiring someone with my background? I want to do work that matters, the way my dad does." Looking at Jessica's hopeful face, I realized that Mountain West's impact was extending beyond the families we housed and the schools we renovated. We were inspiring the next generation of community developers, young people who wanted to build careers around service rather than just profit. "Can you start after graduation?" I asked. Jessica's face lit up. "Really? Really? We need someone with urban planning expertise, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather work with than Robert Chen's daughter." That night, I drove through some of the neighborhoods where Mountain West had completed projects. The Riverside development, where I'd first walked through active construction, was now a thriving community. Children played in the central courtyard, while parents chatted on those front porches Dad had insisted on. The houses weren't mansions, but they were homes, places where families could build memories and futures. I thought about the girl I'd been reading 2 years ago, sitting across from Madison's celebration, feeling invisible and undervalued. That girl couldn't have imagined the life I was living now, not because of the money or the recognition, but because of the sense of purpose that got me up every morning excited about the day ahead. Dad had been right about so many things. He'd understood that I needed to find my own way to contribute to the world. He'd recognized that my definition of success would be different from Madison's, and that both definitions were valid. Most importantly, he'd trusted me with work that aligned with my values, even when I didn't know what those values were yet. Greg, the transformation hadn't just been professional. For the first time in my life, I felt completely confident in who I was and what I had to offer. I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's vision of success. I was creating my own. 5 years after the will reading, I stood in the same conference room at Richardson & Associates, but this time, I was the one with documents to review. Attorney Richardson, now considerably grayer but still sharp, had helped me establish the Harold Torres Foundation for Community Development, a nonprofit organization funded by Mountain West's profits and dedicated to supporting community-based construction projects across the country. The foundation's endowment is now sufficient to fund approximately 15 major projects annually, Richardson explained, reviewing the legal documents. With the matching fund program you've established, that number could easily double. The matching fund program was something I was particularly proud of. For every dollar donated by community organizations, businesses, or individuals, the foundation would contribute $2, tripling the impact of grassroots fundraising efforts. There's one more item, Richardson said, pulling out a familiar-looking envelope. Something your father asked me to give you exactly 5 years after the original reading. My heart stopped. Another letter? He was very specific about the timing. He said you'd need exactly 5 years to understand what he was really giving you. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Dad's handwriting, still so clear and strong on the page. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then 5 years have passed since you inherited Mountain West Development. I chose 5 years because I figured that's how long it would take you to stop seeing this as a burden and start seeing it as a gift. By now, you've probably helped hundreds of families find homes, improved dozens of schools, and created spaces where communities can thrive. More importantly, you've probably discovered that the work chooses you as much as you choose the work. I need you to know something that I couldn't tell you while I was alive. Mountain West Development was never really my company. It was always yours. I just built it and maintained it until you were ready to inherit it. From the time you were 7 years old and insisted we build a birdhouse the right way so the birds would feel safe, I knew you understood something essential about construction that couldn't be taught in business school. You understood that what we build shapes how people live, and how people live shapes who they become. Madison inherited a business. You inherited a calling. Both are exactly what you needed. I hope by now you've also discovered that success isn't measured in dollars earned, but in lives improved. It's not about buildings constructed, but about communities strengthened. It's not about what you accumulate, but about what you contribute. The Torres name has always meant quality construction in Denver, but I wanted it to mean something more. I wanted it to mean hope, opportunity, and the belief that everyone deserves a place where they can flourish. That legacy isn't something I could leave you in a will. It's something you had to create yourself, with your own hands and your own heart. I am proud of the woman you've become, the leader you've grown into, and the difference you're making in the world. But mostly, I'm proud that you never stopped being the little girl who wanted to build things that would make people feel safe. Keep building, Emma. The world needs what you have to offer. All my love, Dad. P.S. Check the Foundation's Board of Directors list. I think you'll find it interesting. With shaking hands, I flipped to the Foundation's incorporation documents. There, listed as the founding board members, were James Patterson, Dr. Sarah Kim, Maria Santos, and, to my complete shock, Madison Elena Torres. I looked up at Richardson. Madison agreed to serve on the foundation board? He smiled. She was actually the one who suggested it. She said she wanted to learn how to see construction the way you and your father did. That evening, Madison and I met for dinner at our usual place, a small family restaurant in the neighborhood where we'd completed our first joint development project. The walls were covered with photos of the community, including several shots of our mixed-use building that had become a model for other developers. So, Madison said after I'd told her about Dad's final letter, "How does it feel to discover you've been living your purpose for 5 years without realizing it?" "Like everything finally makes sense," I admitted. "All those years feeling like I didn't fit in our family, like I wasn't valuable the way you were. Dad was just waiting for me to grow into who I was meant to be." Madison was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. "I was so angry when I found out about the Mountain West. Not just about the money, but about the fact that Dad had seen something in you that he'd never seen in me." "Madison, let me finish," she said gently. "It took me a long time to understand that he didn't see something in you that he didn't see in me. He saw different things in both of us. He knew I'd be good at running a profitable business, and he knew you'd be good at running a meaningful one. He was right about both." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "Torres Construction had its most profitable year ever last year. And you know what I did with the bonus money?" I shook my head. "I established a scholarship fund for children of construction workers who want to go to college. $50,000 annually, renewable for 4 years." She smiled. "I called it the Harold Torres Memorial Scholarship." "Madison, that's incredible." I figured it was time I started building something that mattered too. Not instead of profits, but alongside them. We sat in comfortable silence, watching through the restaurant window as families walked past on the sidewalk. Families who lived in homes we'd built, children who attended schools we'd renovated, neighbors who gathered in community centers we'd created. "Do you think Dad knew," I asked, "that we'd end up working together, supporting each other's companies?" Madison laughed. "Are you kidding? Dad planned everything 15 years in advance. He probably knew we'd be having this exact conversation on this exact date." As I drove home that night, I took a detour through downtown Denver, past the sites of several Mountain West projects. The Jefferson Elementary Library, where children were discovering new books. The Riverside Development, where families were building memories. The community centers where neighbors gathered for everything from quinceañeras to town halls. But I also drove past several Torres construction projects. The office buildings where people earned livelihoods. The retail spaces where families shopped for necessities. The apartment complexes that provided housing for young professionals starting their careers. Madison was right. Dad hadn't loved one company more than the other. He'd created two different ways to serve the community, and he trusted his daughters to run them according to their strengths and values. When I finally arrived home, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign that read, "Mountain West Development Corporation, Building Hope, one home at a time." A note from James explained that all 400 employees had chipped in to commission it from a local craftsman whose workshop we'd helped renovate the previous year. I carried the sign into my house and leaned it against the wall where I could see it from my kitchen table. Tomorrow, we'd hang it in the lobby next to Dad's portrait and the photos of all the families whose lives had been changed by Mountain West's work. But tonight, I just wanted to sit with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the scared, overlooked girl from the will reading had grown into exactly who she was meant to be. Someone who understood that the most important things we build aren't made of concrete and steel. They're made of opportunity, dignity, and hope. Dad had been right about everything. He'd given me more than a company, or money, or recognition. He'd given me a way to love the world through my work. And that legacy would last long after any building we'd ever constructed. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.